Imagine waking up one morning and absolutely everything that runs on electricity is dead. Not just the power in your building. Not just your city. Everything. Your phone, your car, the trains, even the batteries in your flashlight. Now imagine that your family, for people who live in the same apartment but barely talk to each other, suddenly has to survive together with zero practical skills between them. Today we are breaking down Survival Family, the Japanese film that asks one of the most uncomfortable questions a modern person can face. If electricity disappeared forever tomorrow, how long would you actually last? The Suzuki family lives in a modest apartment in suburban Tokyo, and from the very first scenes the film makes clear this is a household held together more by shared address than by any real emotional connection. The father, Yoshiyuki, is a quiet, slightly ineffectual salaryman who commutes to his office every day, comes home exhausted, and has essentially checked out of any active role in family life beyond paying the bills. His wife Mitsu runs the household and has spent years quietly accommodating everyone else's needs, while her own go largely unacknowledged. Their son Kenji is a university student who barely surfaces from behind his phone and headphones, moving through the apartment like a ghost. And their daughter Yui is a high school girl whose entire existence is organized around her smartphone, her appearance, and the social landscape of school. These four people share a space, share meals occasionally, share a last name, and that's essentially where the connection ends. Sound familiar? The film isn't being cruel about this. It's being accurate. Then, on an ordinary Tuesday morning, every single thing that runs on electricity stops working simultaneously. Not a blackout in the traditional sense. Everything. The television, the refrigerator, the phones, the elevator, the trains. Cars won't start. And here's the detail that really starts making people panic. Even the batteries, the little AA cells in every flashlight and clock and remote control in every home, are completely dead. Whatever has happened hasn't just cut the power supply. It has somehow neutralized electricity itself. The first day, most people assume it'll be fixed within hours. The Suzukis and their neighbors crowd around a water faucet that still works and wait. A week passes. Nothing comes back.
No Annoncimente, no Explanation, no Repair Cruz.
Whatever has happened is bigger than anyone initially understood, and there is no timeline for recovery. Do you think you would have figured out faster than the Suzukis that this wasn't going to resolve itself? The film is genuinely funny about how long it takes perfectly intelligent people to fully accept that the rules have changed permanently. Yoshiyuki goes to his office building on the first day, finds it dark and empty, and goes back the next day as if it might be different. There's something painfully relatable about that refusal to accept how serious things actually are. Eventually, Yoshiyuki makes a decision that surprises everyone, including himself. He announces that the family is leaving Tokyo on bicycles, heading all the way to Kagoshima in southern Kyushu, where Mitsu's father lives on a farm. A rumor is circulating that some rural areas still have water, food, and ways of living that don't depend entirely on electricity. The children's reaction is exactly what you'd expect. Being told to get on a bicycle and ride hundreds of kilometers across Japan is met with the kind of resistance that only teenagers who have never had to do anything genuinely difficult can produce. But there are no better options, and Yoshiyuki, for possibly the first time in his life as a parent, insists rather than asks. They load their bikes with whatever supplies they can carry and join a stream of hundreds of thousands of other people doing exactly the same thing, all heading out of Tokyo on foot or bicycle because those are now the only forms of transportation that work. The highway out of the city is packed with people pushing, pedaling, and pulling everything they own. A slow, silent migration that looks nothing like any disaster movie you've ever seen and feels uncomfortably plausible as a result. What would you bring if you had to fit everything you need to survive into bags on a bicycle? The Suzukis bring too much of the wrong things and not enough of the right ones, which is an accurate representation of what most urban families would do in this situation. One of the film's funniest and most pointed sequences involves them watching another family on the road operating with the calm efficiency of people who actually have practical skills. This other family cooks over an open fire without burning everything, catches fish, filters water, and handles each challenge with quiet competence that makes the Suzukis feel deeply, specifically unprepared. Think about how much of what you consider basic survival knowledge is actually just knowledge of how to use appliances. Can you start a fire without a lighter? Can you catch and clean a fish? The film keeps putting these questions in front of the Suzukis, and by extension in front of you, without ever being preachy about it. Mitsu begins adapting faster than Yoshiyuki. She spent years managing a household with limited resources, and some of those skills translate better than expected to the new reality. She figures out how to cook over a fire with more success than her husband manages. She's practical in ways she never had occasion to demonstrate when everything ran on electricity. This is a quiet reversal of the family's normal dynamic that the film handles without making a big deal of it, which makes it more effective. Kenji, the silent son whose entire emotional life seemed to exist through his phone, turns out to have more grit under pressure than anyone expected, gradually stepping up as the journey gets harder. Yui spends the early part of the journey in genuine mourning for the life she had, and her adjustment is slower and more painful, which feels honest rather than convenient. One of the film's most memorable sequences involves the family accidentally killing a pig belonging to a farmer they've encountered along the way. They have no money that means anything anymore, no way to compensate him conventionally. The resolution is that they work on his farm for a period of time to make up for what they've cost him. What happens during that time is structurally the emotional center of the entire film. Cut off from the road, forced to work with their hands in soil, tending animals, performing physical labor that leaves them exhausted in ways their bodies are genuinely not used to, the four Suzukis do something they essentially haven't done in years. They spend real time together. Not the parallel coexistence of people sharing a living space. They talk. They help each other. They eat meals they prepared themselves from food they had a hand in growing. Do you think it takes a complete collapse of everything familiar to force some families to actually find each other? The film suggests, without sentimentality, that for a lot of modern urban families the answer might be yes. The farmer teaches them, somewhat impatiently, basics that most people in previous generations would have simply known as ordinary knowledge. There's a generational commentary embedded in these scenes that doesn't need underlining. The skills required to survive without technology were considered essential for most of human history and have been lost within a single generation of convenience-driven urban life. Eventually, the family leaves the farm, better fed, slightly more skilled, and noticeably more connected to each other than when the journey started. The road south continues and the obstacles keep coming. A swollen river that seems impassable. A pack of dogs that has gone feral in the week since the blackout removed the human infrastructure that shaped their behavior. A rainstorm with no adequate shelter. Food shortages that get serious enough that nobody is pretending everything is fine. The river crossing is the sequence where the film comes closest to genuine danger, and also where the family's transformation becomes most visible. They have to find a way across with no alternative route, and doing it requires everyone to contribute in specific ways, to trust each other physically in a way that was simply never asked of them before. The scene doesn't play as a heroic triumph. It plays as four frightened, exhausted people doing what they have to do because there's no other option, which is actually more affecting than a more conventionally dramatic version would have been. After months on the road, the family finally reaches Kagoshima and finds Mitsu's father living quietly and practically, almost completely unaffected in day-to-day terms because his way of life was already largely electricity independent. He grows his own food, draws water from a well, and has continued existing with the same calm that characterized his life before the blackout, because the blackout didn't remove anything he was actually dependent on. The contrast between the family that arrives, lean and road-worn and fundamentally changed, and the grandfather who greets them with simple undramatic hospitality is one of the film's most quietly effective images. He doesn't make a fuss. He just puts them to work and feeds them. At some point, electricity returns. The film handles this casually rather than dramatically. The lights simply come back one day, and after the initial relief, what's interesting is the family's reaction to the world they've returned to. They are not the same people who left Tokyo on bicycles months ago, panicked and incompetent and barely capable of communicating with each other. How much can a person change when everything they relied on is taken away long enough? The Suzukis come back to Tokyo changed in specific, modest, unflashy ways. Yoshiyuki is more present as a father and husband, not in some dramatic reformed man way, but in the small daily way that actually matters. Mitsu carries a different kind of confidence built from months of genuinely contributing to the family's survival. Kenji and Yui have a relationship with each other and with their parents that simply didn't exist before, forged in a months-long ordeal that gave them shared experience of a kind ordinary life rarely provides. The final scenes show the family back in Tokyo with the city restored, screens back on, convenience stores restocked. But the Suzukis are sitting together at a dinner table actually talking. It's a small image and the film doesn't oversell it. After everything you've watched, it lands exactly right. Here's my honest take. Survival Family is considerably more thoughtful than its premise suggests, and considerably more affecting than a road trip comedy about bicycles has any right to be. Director Shinobu Yaguchi knows exactly how to calibrate tone so that the funnier moments don't undercut the genuine emotional weight building underneath them. What makes it work is that it never loses sight of its real subject, which isn't electricity or disaster preparedness. It's the Suzuki family specifically, for particular people whose disconnection from each other is the actual crisis the film is concerned with, and the blackout is simply the mechanism that forces them to address it. The electricity doesn't come back and fix the family. The family fixes itself while the electricity is gone. Is there something uncomfortable about the idea that it might take a complete collapse of modern infrastructure to push some families into actually engaging with each other? Absolutely. That's a pointed observation dressed up as a comedy adventure, and it's all the more effective for not announcing itself as such. Compared to most Western disaster films, the tone here is almost defiantly gentle. Very little violence, no real villain, no government conspiracy, no dramatic revelation about what caused the blackout. The film is more interested in the thousand small moments of inadequacy, adaptation, and unexpected tenderness that make up a survival journey than in any single dramatic event. That restraint is a choice, and it's the right one for what this story is actually about. And here's the question worth sitting with when the credits roll. What is in your life right now that you genuinely would not know how to replace if it disappeared tomorrow? Not your phone specifically. Something more basic. Something the Suzukis didn't know they were missing until the road to Kagoshima showed them what they'd let go. If you enjoyed this breakdown, hit like and subscribe, because there are plenty more underseen gems just like this one waiting to be unpacked.